Christan Huang. And Christian, I heard about Christian 5 years ago when I came to this church because they interviewed him for the position that I'm working now, and he said no. Thank God, so that I have a job. And thank God, so that he could do what actually God really called him to do in a very powerful way in this last 5 years. And since then, I've heard about him, his ministry, and all of that. And we connected actually in person a few months ago. And I just started hearing what he wanted to do and he's doing through Mobilize Love. Really felt this is something that he needs to share more, especially in Santa Clara County and other places because he's focused in San Francisco. But there's so much of connection and overflow in what both of us are trying to do by sharing this to the church and getting the church equipped, and Mobilize Love actually taking those resources to the pocket. So it's my privilege to introduce Christian. Take it over.
Thank you so much, Finney. Thank you so much. Man, it's great to be in a room full of doers. I'm so tired of people talking. I'm serious. And so to just hear people doing it, I'm so encouraged and inspired, and so much alignment with Finney and his vision. I almost feel like we're brothers, like Harold and Kumar, but only a couple of people got that. Let me tell you a quick story here. Thank you so much. This is a picture of my dad. My dad was a Taiwanese immigrant, dropped off in San Francisco in the middle of the hippies movement in the 70s, didn't understand a word of English, and on top of that, he was abused for 18 years of his life by his father, physically and verbally, almost every single day. And finally, when he was strong enough to run away, he was actually homeless in San Francisco for a while. And he thought it was better to live in a little alcove in the Richmond district of someone's apartment building than to be at home. So he was just sleeping on the streets and worked his way up. He's a hard worker, got 2 to 3 jobs, worked his way into a corporate job, climbing the corporate ladder, living his life, but partying hard at nights just to medicate because of the pain and just the loneliness of life. And one night, my dad comes home. He's drunk, passed out on the couch. And there's a televangelist named Jimmy Swaggart preaching about Jesus. And my dad was like, subconsciously, no joke, like, wow, this is actually the hope I've been looking for. I've never heard of this man, Jesus. This is what I'm looking for. And that night, he gave his life to the Lord. And as a Taiwanese immigrant who didn't understand a word of English, then was called into the Tenderloin community of San Francisco, and my dad has been serving that area for the past 35, 36 years now. In fact, today he's there now. Like, you can't stop the guy. He's there like every single day he's got that immigrant mentality, no Sabbath. We don't believe in Sabbath, he's probably gonna, I tell him, you're probably gonna die in the TL, not from old age, but just because it's violent. But he's just there every day, no fear. And his first reaction to Christianity, though, after discovering the hope, was this question: how come no one came to tell me? He's like, you guys have this hope, and no one even knocked on my door and told me it had to be through Jimmy Swaggart. Now, my dad's story really helped shape my worldview and also the idea of Mobilize Love. So 5 years ago, my wife and I, we thought to ourselves, man, there's some serious gaps in the city, some issues, some need. And what are we uniquely gifted and passionate about? And we landed on this idea of Mobilize Love. And we exist to, by the way, can I just say something? My deck is horrible, okay? And Finney, your deck makes me insecure. So, but I'll tell you this, here's my disclaimer. You think as an Asian man I should have a better looking deck. I get it. But I'm also half French, so I kind of just surrendered and gave up. Mobilize Love exists to show up and give hope. So we believe every person deserves access to hope and help and community. So we exist to show up and give people access to help and hope. So we use the language show up because half the battle for people in poverty, and I'm not just talking about socioeconomic poverty, I'm talking about relational poverty. Half the battle is that they often don't have access to the help and hope. So simply by showing up and being a faithful presence in their life, we're positioned to truly help as needed. So our mission is to show up because we know this. I was a youth pastor for 11 years. Whoever shows up wins the battle of influence. That's one thing I know. But show up where? So Mobilize Love, we show up where others won't. We look for places like poverty pockets, food deserts, or places in San Francisco where there's little to no resources. If we wanted to triple our numbers now, we know where to go in the city where people would line up for meals. And there's oversaturated areas where there's a lot of services. But what we're trying to do is go to the areas like Double Rock of San Francisco, where the city would put up 1,100 families in 4 buildings, and there's no parking, no liquor store, no corner store, no grocery store, no restaurant. In fact, if you're a mother and you forgot milk, you have to walk 1.1 miles to another community just to get milk. And that's at a liquor store. That's where we want to go. The numbers may be less, but that's why we exist. We want to show up where others won't or where there's little to no resources. So it's kind of like if Ted put on this great event but never gave you the address. Well, so it is. It's like a waste of resources. It's like that in San Francisco. There are actual great resources in San Francisco, robust systems to help get people out, but often people don't know how to navigate those systems. They're too broken to engage the systems. They need an advocate that can come and help them. And so our whole idea is, well, okay, we got to show up, though. If you don't show up, you can't win the battle of influence. So we deliver help and hope and community right to where people live. And there's also this spiritual component, being that we're the most unchurched area in America. So if families won't darken the door of the church, we like to say, well, let's Amazon Prime the gospel to them. But regardless of what we're delivering, whether it's actual tangible resources or educational programs or the gospel explicitly, the model and the whole idea is showing up, especially where others won't. So, okay, but here's the thing. What do we show up and what do we do? You show up. Okay, we exist, you show up. What do you actually do? Well, presence without purpose is a little bit unnerving. In other words, if someone just came right now and just walked right up to the stage and just stood here, his presence is here, but he said nothing. That makes everyone uncomfortable. Well, so it is when you enter into a new community to serve them. You can't just show up and do nothing. And you can't show up without a purpose. You have to have a purpose, otherwise you're not welcome there. So we landed on these 2 buckets because we kind of assessed and we researched and we talked to families and we landed on these 2 buckets: mobile human services and then mobile after-school programs. That's what we deliver. We deploy a fleet of outreach trucks to give kids and families specifically access to help, which is human services meeting their felt needs. And then we dove a little deeper. Like there's some systemic issues that we can help solve. There's a lot of issues, but Mobilize Love, we're really only uniquely qualified and passionate about 2 of them, or 3 of them, excuse me. It's food relief, social emotional skills, and literacy. So we developed this after-school program that's mobile and that happens right on their sidewalk. These are a few of our trucks. We have a fleet of trucks that includes a laundry truck and a clothing truck, a stage truck for our mobile after-school program, a stories truck, which is a mobile library for our literacy program, and then the Bay Area's first nonprofit food truck given by Jeremy Lin. And I say that first Bay Area nonprofit food truck because City Team stole my idea and built the second one. I'm just kidding. I worked for City Team for 3 years, so I love it. But we were first. But our flagship program. So obviously, you can go kind of like Jesus, he understands, man, poverty is going to be around for a long, long time. And you can go to a neighborhood and just feed people all day, and then go back the next day and feed people all day and meet their felt needs, cut hairs, and do all. Yes, you could do that all day. But strategically, what is a systemic issue that we can tackle? When we started realizing with these families, man, the children are being left behind, socially and educationally. So we developed the mobile after-school program, which I'll talk about in a second. But let me just ask this question: why human services? Well, like Finney actually said, very much aligned with you, Finney, that these extreme low-income families are the most vulnerable population right now. When I was a kid, when you thought of a homeless man in San Francisco, it was actually a middle-aged white man is what would come to mind. And then it evolved into a middle-aged man of color, and that's what it evolved. Did you know that the fastest growing homeless segment right now in the Bay Area are actually families? It's families. Single mothers with 2 children is, on average, the fastest growing population of homelessness is families now. They're the most vulnerable because they're only one check away from that slippery slope of public housing and then kids becoming the ward of the state and entering into the system. And when you enter into that system, data will show that it is almost impossible. It'll be generational poverty at that point. To break out takes sometimes a miracle. So that's why when we enter, we say we're going to meet their tangible needs. Why? If you just look at the extreme low-income family finances, after they've paid rent, their bills, and they buy food for their kids, they have $300 left over to live off of for 30 days. So when we show up and we say, we'll cut your kids' hair for free, it's not some charity work for us to make ourselves feel better. It's a need. And you should see some of these kids' hair. It's a need. It's an actual need. And these mothers, when we show up with hot meals and we feed them, yes, we'll feed them on site, but we also give them meals to go home. I'll tell you, I've had several mothers during the pandemic weep because there was no white space for moms in pandemic. Kids were home all the time. Just the fact that they could take a night off and not have to figure out how to cook that day or where the food was coming from, it's a need. It's a need. So we meet the felt needs, but also we dove a little deeper and we said, what could we provide that's strategic? And we really landed on the idea that children are being left behind socially and educationally. In fact, the National Assessment of Educational Progress just released in September, last month, the results which showed the biggest decline of academic achievement in the last 50 years. It happened from 2020 to 2021. The biggest decline in 50 years. Achievement gaps have worsened, and declines are worse for students who were already struggling. Their kids are being left behind. And all the data shows how important literacy is. I don't have to remind you guys that. But so we developed this flagship program, which is a mobile after-school program. And what this looks like is we go into a low-performing or under-resourced public school or a housing project, whoever will welcome us in, and we bring and we offer our 3 trucks for the mobile after-school program, a stage truck, storage truck, and a food truck. And so what it looks like, the full program is the stage truck will start with a 30 to 45-minute high-energy rally where we will teach these kids through song and dance and competitive games. We always teach them a social-emotional skill, also known as a life lesson. Or if we're in the housing projects and they allow us, we straight up preach the gospel right on the street. Sidewalk Sunday School. And then once the stage truck is finished, we then invite them into our storage truck where we really measure 2 things. Because our niche within literacy, first of all, we're not a school, so we're not gonna make huge advancements in kids' growth in literacy because we're not a full-on library, we're not a full-on school, but we do have this niche that we've landed on at Mobilize Love, which is this. We want to measure their motivation to read and then their movement towards growth. Because here's the thing that we found. Kids, when faced with a bicycle, book, or a basketball, they're not choosing the book. They lack the desire to read. It's not modeled in the home. It's not prioritized at home. And literacy rates are getting really bad. So what we've decided to do is we'll gamify reading. So we built this whole truck to gamify reading. In other words, we make reading fun enough for kids to engage. We make them compete against one another. And here's the thing. We use 2 systems. And it's technology. It's AR, Accelerated Reading Program. Once they read a book, we either read to them, we read together, or they read to us, or we do read-alouds. And then they go right online to the laptop, take a test through accelerated reading, which measures their comprehension through a quiz, and then the number of words read. Immediately, we take the points that they've earned and put it on a leader's board so they can see their progress and where they're lining up. And we incentivize them every 20 minutes. We reward, and we tell them how awesome reading is. And then guess what? You should see, man, in the one school we're at, the principal said kids that would never read are now like fully engaged in the library at their school. because it needs to be modeled and it needs to be fun. That's our niche. We're not a full-on library, but hey, we're going to make reading fun. So, and then after they do our literacy program, which is mobile, we then pop up in the food truck where we will serve hot meals. And we'll share a meal together as well as offer meals to go for their home. Well, you may say, Christian, I actually had a friend, because I used to work at City Impact, I used to work at City Team, and then I was telling them, hey, I'm building these trucks and we're going to reach kids, and he just kind of made a comment, and he didn't think anything of it, but it really hurt my feelings. He's like, dude, you're going to do kids ministry? Isn't that a step backwards? And I thought to myself, yeah, unless you read the Bible. Because according to kids, spiritually speaking, I won't get into the theology of why kids, but spiritually speaking, 64% of born-again Christians today in America made a decision to follow Christ between the ages of 4 and 14. That's called the 4 to 14 window. So my simple question is this: if Jesus calls us to be fishers of men, why not fish where they bite? I don't have no patience for fishing. I go to the market to get my fish, all right? If we're gonna fish, go to the children, for God's sake, right? But why not? And I understand why, because they don't tithe. They don't even say thank you. And you won't see the fruit of your result. You won't see the results for like 20 years. But nonetheless, children, because after working 20 plus years in the Tenderloin and in South of Market, when you reverse engineer people's stories, and I have a lot of friends that still live in Tenderloin and South of Market. You hear their story, and it was usually 1, 2, 3 traumatic occurrences that happened in their life during their formative years. Because the enemy knows this. He wants to disrupt the lives of children by stealing and destroying their child, because he knows it's much easier to uproot an acorn than to tear down an oak tree. So needs of communities can evolve and change. In fact, what we do in one community may look completely different than, it doesn't matter though for us. Programs can pivot all day. We're always tweaking our model, but the mission of showing up never changes, because you have to show up in order to win the battle of influence. Like Open Door Legal is one of my favorite nonprofits. I can't do what this man does. I ain't smart enough. I can't do what Healing Grove does. I don't even get it. But God gifted me in such a way where I will keep showing up in your life. Look, you should see my wife's ex-boyfriend before she dated me. Tall, handsome, wealthy, beautiful car, great job. I kept showing up. That's the idea. Last one. I'm serious. Because let me tell you something. There's no hack for human connection. There's no program for human connection. You show up, you stay put, you be a faithful presence, you earn the right to speak into their life. I could show you texts and emails all day. This man, this father of one of the programs, one of the sites, he said, I'm being evicted now. Okay? Why is he able to text me? He's too broken to engage the system. Guess who I called? Open Door Legal. I said, I need a lawyer. I haven't heard back, but we're getting there. It's okay. I'm joking, Adrian. It's probably on my end. I probably lost it. But the last thing I'll say is, more than a nonprofit, Mobilize Love is actually, and there was a story there, but skip it for time. But Mobilize Love is an idea, which is this, that love shows up. Anyone could say, I love you from afar, but true love shows up. Want to know why? Like, if you want to know who really loves you, call the 5 friends you think are your friends and tell them you're moving this weekend. Whoever shows up actually loves you. Mobilize Love's an idea that love shows up. Anyone can say, I love you from afar, even God himself. It's the idea that God himself could have just said, I love you from heaven. No, but the progression of John 3:16 and 17 is God so loved the world that he gave, so he sent. In other words, love has to go, because whoever shows up wins the battle of influence. And the idea, we are an idea basically that we have to Amazon Prime the gospel. If they're not going to come to church, that's fine. But we got to go out. We got to go out. And like my brother said, like, how do you see the poverty pockets within your own church because people don't want to go out? It's fine. Just take the few that are willing, because you only need a few. You only need 2. Never go alone. You need at least one more. You could, anyways, sorry. I'm done, man. 9 minutes left. I don't have any, my slide's horrible.
I have to admit, Finney's presentation is better, but you've got a super cool logo, so I love that. Questions? Do we have a question?
Yes, Adrian.
So, in your book truck,
Yeah.
have you ever thought about having like a World Book Encyclopedia there? And testing whether kids can memorize income tables. I hear it's just really, really engaging.
So you talk about numeracy?
Yeah.
No, I know. I was just joking.
That's a plug for showing up on time if you miss that. He's referring to what he shared last night. You can go to YouTube and watch the video of Adrian's presentation. Ted Haas, just look for Ted Haas on YouTube. If you didn't get his presentation last night, it's brilliant. You need to watch it.
I was wondering, which truck did you start out with? What was the first, time out to the community?
Yeah, so it's the food truck. It's always food. If you were to ask me, how do you engage a community, or like I have a passion for this community, I would say, food usually is the way in to almost every community. So I knew right away, like, hey, because I spent my whole career in the Tenderloin in South of Market. And so I was like, I don't know how to go to the Bayview and Hunters Point. That's another neighborhood, and I'm not the right color. But I'll tell you this, food breaks down every barrier. So we built, and the reason why a food truck versus just like showing up with hot meals is it's very dignifying. We ask the families, when's the last time you've had a food truck in your neighborhood? Never. So the fact, and we like to say, we have two food truck areas in San Francisco. It's called Off the Grid and Spark Social. And so I tell our givers, I say, hey, not our families can't afford to go to Off the Grid or Spark Social, so we literally go off the grid to spark social justice. But in other words, we bring the food truck, man. That's the number one.
Christian, how are churches involved, and what is the requirement for you to be in a community? Because I really think, what you're doing and equipping churches to do what you do is the way to scale. But how are you engaging with churches now, and is there any requirements for you to be in a community?
Yeah, so, some of our language is a little off-putting because we say pop-up community outreaches, pop-up, we're mobile. But I want you to realize that when we make a commitment to a neighborhood, we've vetted the neighborhood, and we have actually a filter that we go through. If we have found a community partner, and then we have found a church partner, then we will commit to that neighborhood. Otherwise, we don't want to pop in and out of people's lives. So that's why we have only landed on 6 sites in San Francisco, because those are the sustainable, ongoing neighborhoods that we will continue with. We've been invited to, 20 neighborhoods, but we say no. We've committed to these 6 because there's a community partner and usually a church partner that's willing to. And so, we have this whole partnership model called Engine. It's what makes us run. But basically, we're not the main thing. We are we are Amazon Prime, honestly, in the sense that we deliver help, hope, and community. And so, our services really are limited to like food relief, social emotional skills, and literacy. Beyond that, we provide advocates that can help them with more as needed. So we are very collaborative, actually, with a lot of other nonprofits, because another nonprofit would say, like, they can't rally the way we rally, but they do the work that we can't do. So when we gather the families and they're together, then we tell this other nonprofit, come, tell them what you have. Tell them what you have available. So very collaborative between NGOs and churches. We haven't been able to break through corporate world yet, but we'll get there at some point.
All right.
So you develop partnerships within the communities. How long is your commitment term in that community? And then what do you do to equip those partners to sustain your goal or your vision or your thrust?
When I was younger, I had a Messiah complex. God needs me to save the city. And now I'm 40, and I'm like, wow, God has his people everywhere. And they're doing the work. they just, what I found, okay, in 4 out of the 6 sites we're at, it's actually a black woman that's under-resourced but has a maternal heart for the neighborhood. And she is the faithful presence in that place. She's the one, she knows every family. She's the mother of the community, and she knows what's going on in every family, but she's usually heartbroken, under-resourced, and overwhelmed. So I build relationship with her. And what we do is we say we make them the local hero. Unfortunately, we brand our trucks and stuff because the donors give us money, so we got to show what we do. But the neighborhood does not care who we are, and we don't want them to know who we are. It does not matter to us. We make them the local hero. Even when we go to public schools, we make the principal the local hero. We are merely a delivery method. And so when we commit to that woman, though, like when in the sense, I'm thinking of like Shoreview or Oakdale, when we found that woman of peace, they've opened up to us. Obviously, they're very skeptical. They think that we have, but unfortunately, you just got to keep showing up and build trust. 2020 for us gave us what the streets call a LTO, a license to operate. Because they believed that we were coming in, being the wrong color, coming into their neighborhood to just kind of do work, and it was very off-putting for a couple of people. They told me that after. But because 2020, a lot of nonprofits couldn't invite people in, it was like God, you know how Noah built the ark and looked crazy until it rained? We built these trucks looking crazy until pandemic. Because the moment the pandemic hit, we were outdoor and we were mobile. And so when we started to continue to show up, they realized we really don't want anything from them. We're there to bless. So we don't have a term, but we found a person of peace. They're the local hero. And we just keep pushing people to their programs and their nonprofits. We're just there to highlight the work and to do and then do our part. But they're under-resourced. That's our part. I feel like, churches have a lot of resources. Like, we get pallets of stuff all the time. They don't get that stuff. We bought a warehouse. We got trucks. We have manpower. We have 13 church partners in San Francisco. Like, that's our gift to these communities. And so we're just kind of that relational glue to tie that all together.
All right. Well, it's turned out that the Q&A is as popular as the round table talk. The good news is, don't panic. These speakers are sticking around for lunch, and you can ask them your questions directly. So you guys have a minute to discuss around your tables. I want you to ask the one person who's the shyest, who hasn't been talking, what's their main takeaway from what Christian just shared.